Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network. And welcome back, everybody. We are joined again from a gentleman who has given us lots of insight on what goes into planning municipalities, transportations, towns, cities, and villages. And what's interesting is he's given me insight into where I live. Things I didn't even know, didn't even realize the history of where I am in New York. He's actually in Pennsylvania, but every area is on his radar as a retired urban and regional planner at the University of Pittsburgh. He's our man of the year. Richard Golden Bickel Jr. is back on the program. How are you doing today, Richard?
I'm doing fine. Looking forward to your questions.
Yeah, we do have some. By the way, if you want to reach in, instantfeedbacksteve@gmail.com, the best way to reach us. And before we even get into any of that, I don't do politics. I never engage in any of that. But I am curious, with the elections coming up tomorrow, is there anything that, without getting into any candidates specifically or anything like that, is there anything, Richard, that you're hoping for there could be some potential change in terms of the way things are done, money is set aside or appropriated for regional planning? Anything on your radar in that regard?
Well, this is a landmark election, and the lead keeps bouncing back and forth between the two candidates and the two parties, and it's going to be critical for the near future of transportation planning if a party gets in that is opposed to public transit, for example, or funding for other initiatives that relate to that versus one that is a proponent of public transit. And I think we've had that for the last 4 years.
Gotcha. Yeah. If you had a magic wand, magic bank account, and you could put federal funds into something right now, a fairly sizable amount, where would you put it? Where would you funnel it? Where would you focus it?
Well, the needs of the country are varied between urban areas like New York and some of the rural areas in the West. But I think the highest priority at least for the New York metro area and places like Philadelphia would be more funding to rebuild the transportation infrastructure that we already have. Gotcha.
Yeah, if you pick even those two states or two cities, what stands out for you in terms of what's missing?
Well, for example, in the New York metro area, the funding for a new tunnel paralleling the existing tunnel near I-95 would be helpful to stop the log jams that occur when trains are trying to get into Penn Station or Moynihan Station and that kind of thing, where we have existing infrastructure that worked fine for a long time, but now we need two tunnels, not one.
Yep.
And the cost, I think, was $86 billion, and the time frame is 4 or 5 years from now. It can't be done overnight. That's one of the problems of infrastructure. Even if you have the funding, you've got to schedule the project, and these big projects take a long time.
Any project takes a long time, even if they do road work, construction, small area of an interstate. My gosh, it's
That's
right.
True.
So I want to read an email we got, instantfeedbacksteve@gmail.com. I've got Dawn in Oakland, California. I just want to say that apparently, when we've been talking, Richard, you are inspiring younger people and their parents, because Dawn is a parent, and she says, my son is 16 and is fascinated by statistics, and he's also interested in how cities are put together. Is data a part of the schooling to become an urban planner?
Yes, it's essential. You have to know about population and employment conditions and trends, and that's generally called demographics. And if you don't know that, then you're starting off with your feet in the ground because you don't have the background on the area that you're planning for, what the population is like, whether it's going up or declining, what's the basis for a project.
Interestingly, you've revealed before that you were heading in a medical direction before you decided to go in the direction that you did for many years. Were you fascinated with the data, the statistics that come back within the planning?
Well, I would say at that time I was not, but as far as being a doctor, that was a dream, but it didn't pan out because I didn't do well in chemistry. And when I discovered urban geography, that led to getting into planning and staying at Pitt for my master's degree. I just didn't know enough about the field to know what was essential at that time. And I would say, as a basis for starting out, you've got to get into demographics.
Yeah, you seriously, and that goes back to what we were just talking about before, even with the train tunnels in New York City. The demographics change, even look at the medical side. Baby boomers are living longer. They're more active. That's even more part of the population that is traveling because people are still working, even though they're older. Then you have the younger generation. Has it, back to how long it takes to get these projects done. With some of the projects you did it surprise you? Even though you're behind the planning aspect, how that maybe it took longer than expected because of, things that have popped up, during the project implementation?
Yeah, when I was at SEPTA, the Public Transit Agency for the Philadelphia region, we had a project to look at a rail line, which is currently the so-called Trenton Cutoff, that's along the I-95 corridor. We wanted to have a passenger rail service, and it sounded like a good project on paper, and we had consultants looking at it, but then the numbers were not good. It came up that the ridership would be very poor, and so again, the demographics came out, and that killed the idea.
Wow. Along the way, what would you say are some of your proudest projects that you were involved in?
Well, first and foremost would be the rewriting of the Pennsylvania Planning Code with a few other people. We had a task force from our American Planning Association chapter in Pennsylvania, and we sat down and went through the planning code and came up with a lot of new ideas and streamlining. Secondly would be I helped to draft the Transit Revitalization Investment District Act, which could have been called TOD, the TOD Act, because transit-oriented development is a key component of building transit projects because you want to make sure that the station areas can attract development and taxes that can help pay for the project in the long term.
Wow. Okay. Taxes. We never even talked about taxes. There must have been a lot of pushback many times within projects and people, like you've said before, not in my backyard. Was that a challenge for you along the way?
It became a challenge in many places because I started out as a local planner working in Montgomery County, Pennsylvania, and going to night meetings with local planning commissions and elected officials. And there you get to see the grassroots NIMBY right before your eyes without even a development proposal coming in, because people are very uptight when projects are proposed that might change their neighborhood character or impact it in some way.
Sure. And even though they may see the benefits there's the unseen side of it. And I have to believe that a lot of residents may not be aware of the data that and the planning that went into it, the project. You know what I mean? Like they road going in my backyard, no way. But they might not realize how it's going to open up the city area. There will be less traffic generally. I get if it's a interstate going up in your backyard. Okay, I get that. But some of the secondary roads, it might be a major benefit, and even in terms of the amount of money that comes in, that it's just easier for people to shop. So I'm sure there's a lot of stuff that people, and they're always going to click a link and go deep into it. They might not even understand it. I got another question, and this one is coming from Jake. Jake checks in from Clearwater Beach, Florida, and says, what is the difference between a junior urban planner and a senior urban planner?
Different agencies use different terminology. When you first start out, you're a planner, and then if you gain experience and are promoted, you're a senior planner. And then after that, if you're really promoted, you're an associate director, that kind of thing. Junior planner to me would be either an intern title or a title for a 1 or 2 year planner. And then the general plan, the associate director level might be 10 years in your career.
So it sounds like a junior urban planner might be doing more coordinating community projects, researching it, collecting tax data, things like that, where a senior urban planner is more in the trench, if you will.
Yeah, the junior planner might end up doing the background work that results in the policies that are created that the associate director might implement, working with the county commissioners or others who are the policymakers for that area.
Gotcha. And I would imagine it's a bachelor's degree for a junior planner, and a senior urban planner probably would be a master's?
Well, yes. In the planning profession, there are two levels, a master's degree in planning or a undergraduate degree, and both can be accredited by the Planning Accreditation Board. And if they're accredited, someone who wants to get into planning and doesn't want to make the time commitment to get a master's degree could get an undergraduate degree in planning. And that's a stepping stone to a career. Because I started out wanting to be a doctor, I didn't even think about planning until my second term, my junior year. So it was a different path for me.
And I'm hearing the job growth rate is projected to be like 11% for urban planners, which I'm hearing is much faster or much higher than the average. We're going to go to a call. I'm going to assume this might be Cameron. Who's this?
Hi. Yes, this is Cameron. Thank you for having me back on. I was actually listening in, and very insightful what you guys are talking about. I wanted to ask Mr. Bickel if, when it comes to choosing a job, what areas did he look in?
Well, I had a general planning degree. It wasn't totally focused in one area. So I was looking for work that would involve a variety of experiences that could then be used to shape a career. And that's where Montgomery County Planning, which is in Norristown, Pennsylvania, just west of Philadelphia, that fit the bill. It was an excellent grounding. And I stayed there for 14 years because it was also an opportunity to grow in that region. And by the time I was finished, I was more involved in transportation policy planning than I was in the day-to-day night meeting planning.
Gotcha.
Wow. And that's what made you choose your job?
That background helped to shape my job. I never would have worked at SEPTA if I hadn't had the grounding in Montgomery County, including representing the county commissioners at some meetings. And so I realized that planning is both nuts and bolts, but also policy. And that policy is what drives the funding and other decision-making at the county and regional level.
And who said, when we talk about policy, essentially, who is setting the policy? Is it lawmakers?
Yes. The county commissioners are running the county, but they're also setting policy. The planning director would go to them and say, I have this idea, what do you think? Or we're working on this project at the Regional Planning Commission, and how does Montgomery County fit in? They would then basically make a policy decision do we support this idea, or are we opposed, and why? And the planning director, if they want to keep working, would go along with that.
Wow.
Insightful.
Cameron, thank you very much for calling in, especially from Australia. And I always wanted to say this. Good day, mate.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
I've been following you guys for a while, so it's very insightful. I enjoy you. Be good.
Appreciate it. Be well. I want to focus for just a moment. We talk about the policy. Can you give an example, Richard, one or two, policies that you had to work through or work by, or just hypothetical, just so we have a better idea of what, the term policy means?
The policy is a commitment to add funding to help implement a project. It's also a way to deal with the NIMBY syndrome, because you don't want to be out there on your own. You want the support of the county commissioners and others to help rationalize the policy, what it is, what you're trying to do. I think policies are important, but you've also got to have good staff, and you've got to have a commitment to get things done. And the planning framework is local planning, county planning, and regional planning. And the regional planning, the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission is the planning agency for the Philadelphia region. The Regional Planning Commission is where decisions are made by their board on supporting what's called the Transportation Improvement Program. And the Transportation Improvement Program contains the money for projects like the second tunnel and other things. In New York, it's the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, and each area is different, and it's critical that you introduce planning at every level, and hopefully they'll all work together.
I'm still fascinated that you were planning a career in medical. And because I can't relate to it. I always wanted to do what I'm doing now. I wanted to be a cartoonist at some point as well, but the radio thing was me. So it's hard for me to get my arms around, one path and then pivoting over to another one. And these two paths were vastly different for you.
Right. My father was a commercial artist, and so that was even more different. And I couldn't draw very well, etc. But he went to Cooper Union for 2 years in New York, and then got drafted in World War II. So he never quite went back to get his degree, but he ended up working in Manhattan and spent a lot of time working on advertisements, drawing white lines around words, because when they took a photograph of it, those words had to pop off the page so that the photograph would work for an advertising.
Wow. Jeez, I came very close to being a syndicated cartoonist, but I was already doing radio for like 5 years. And I'm talking, this is in my early 20s, but I'm going to be very honest in this conversation. When you talked about your father, I didn't really make the connection to mine. He passed when I was 21, but he worked in a plant as an engineer, but he was very into electrical and electronics. And my career began because I taught myself how to make PC boards, and I made a mixer so I could mix music. And I never put the two together, that my dad was kind of in the electrical field because it's been so long. And I've been doing the same thing ever since, since I was 10 years old, making stuff. Every wire in this studio, and I'm in a building, that's my office, my studio. I wired everything, every single, I didn't bring anybody in because that was my passion.
That's great.
And it turns out, for you, urban planning was your passion. But when I look at it as flying over the bleachers, if you will, you wanted to make a difference and help people as a doctor, and you wound up doing that as an urban planner, just in a different area. Would you say there's a little bit of a connection there?
Well, you're dealing with people, and you're dealing with policymakers, and you've got to approach these projects diplomatically and with sincerity. You can't just show up and say, I want to build this, and that's it. I blame Dr. Kildare and Ben Casey TV shows for turning me towards medicine, and that goes back to the 60s.
I know the shows you're talking about. Very, very aware. Very aware. I couldn't tell you the actors, but if I thought about it long enough, I might get them. It might come to my mind.
And so I think no matter what your background is, you can become a planner if you decide to go to graduate school or undergraduate and get a degree. You can learn the basics, and then once you start working, you're going to be interacting with a variety of people, some positive, some negative, but you pick up experience, and that's how you move ahead.
I'm pivoting over for a moment. Marcus Welby. Do you remember that one too?
Yes.
He was almost like the doctor that would come to your house, if I remember correctly. Wow. Final question, because there's definitely a lot of inspiration to a younger generation when it comes to urban planning and what you've done. If you go into the urban planning direction, and let's say you feel it's maybe not exactly right for you, a la you going into medical, but then you pivoted over to urban planning, what other areas could somebody go into? Even if they're going down that road, they're getting that schooling, are there other areas they could branch off to?
Sure, they could get into engineering, just like many engineers sometimes end up also being in planning. That's important because you're talking about infrastructure projects and building them. And you could go into social-oriented fields because you're dealing with demographics and also the needs of people in poverty areas versus the needs of people in wealthier suburbs. And those, to understand that is critical. You can't just walk into a room and say, this is the greatest project ever. You've got to support it. You've got to sell it and work on it.
There's so much going on here, not just from the data, not just from the planning, but you've also got the connection with the community. And it gets very personal. There's a lot going on there. And my view here today is the data. There's a lot, stats and all of that. There's a lot that goes into urban planning. Richard, great having you on here on the show. And again, I want to share with everybody, if you have any questions about the field or for Richard in general, anything we talked about, instant feedback, steve@gmail.com, best place to reach us. Richard, there's a reason you're our man of the year with the inspiration that you provide for many, and totally appreciate you being here once again today.
Oh, thank you. Well, tomorrow's a big day, and the day after is going to be bigger. So yeah, it's funny you say that. I just saw about the day after. There's a private school in New York City that is giving students, if they need it, the day off. Because you can't make this stuff up. They're giving them the day off because of the potential emotional drain on them. Isn't that something? Right. Wow. Yeah, and the vote makes everything, right down to, the planning. So once again, appreciate you being here, and we'll catch up next time. All right, thank you. Thank you.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
When it comes to making plans, you are the best. What about those round trips that you plan in advance, which are perfect on your way there and perfect on your way back? Or those meetings with friends for which you make a group chat 3 months before so that nobody or anything is missing? Or your daughter's first birthday party. You planned it with such dedication that instead of the first, it felt like our 15s. The same way you plan each detail for those moments. Start planning to protect you and your loved ones from a natural disaster. Sign up for local weather and emergency alerts. Prepare an emergency kit. And make a family communications plan. Protecting your family is the best plan you can make. Get started at ready.gov/plan.
Brought to you by FEMA and the Ad Council.